Welcome to our presentation. Our project is titled Inclusion and Equality, Seeking to Bridge the Gap for Students with Special Needs. Thank you for joining us. My name is Brandon.
My name is Eduardo.
I'm Carolina.
And I'm Ryan.
And we are so excited to share in this presentation with you and tackle an important topic in education today. So let's get started. Ladies and gentlemen, our guiding question throughout this presentation is going to be, how can we best serve students with special needs in a language arts classroom? And we're going to begin our discussion by just familiarizing ourselves with, who children with special needs are in the classroom. In a 2019-2020 survey, the number of students aged 3 to 21 who received special education services under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, was 7.3 million children, or roughly 14% of all public school students. And among students receiving special education services, the most common category of disability, roughly 33%, was specific learning disabilities. That includes things like dyslexia. The reason we're talking about children with special needs today is just because it is an incredibly salient issue in our classrooms, all right? Our classrooms have varied ability levels, and as educators, we must be equipped to serve children of diverse ability, all right? In a 2006 study, 47% of classrooms in America had more than 20% of students with learning disabilities, all right, special needs. And this research indicates that there is no such thing as a normal classroom. So over 2 million children who receive services under the Individuals with, under IDEA, roughly 1 in 5, they are 5 years behind their typically developing peers in terms of their academic achievement. That's the real reason we're here, talking about children with special needs. Students with an intellectual disability, they experience deficiencies in their learning to read, and they require systematic and intentional comprehension instruction. These students, they struggle using effective memory and rehearsal strategies to organize and chunk and elaborate on their thinking in ways that facilitate learning. These students also struggle to create meaningful relationships among sets of ideas. So what we're going to talk about today is how we as teachers can improve the literacy outcomes of children with special needs by effectively incorporating strategies to help them self-monitor and create meaning in their reading. And we're going to have some other folks come up here and begin to talk about these ideas.
So our next question led us to ask, what challenges do educators face when providing literacy instruction to students with special needs? And we found 2 salient challenges. 1, the research to practice gap for implementing evidence-based strategies in the classroom, as well as decontextualized reading skills practice that do occur in the classroom. So research to practice gap for implementing evidence-based practice. What we found was that many teachers do not undergo any preparation to work in inclusive environments with learners who have special education needs and disabilities. In addition, many teachers express low to moderate levels of confidence in implementing evidence-based practices for their students. Teachers instead rely on their own personal judgment when it comes to implementing evidence-based practices, which can result in ineffective or harmful practices being utilized more frequently than evidence-based practices. So this poses a large problem. There's a disconnect between the research that's happening that tells us what are effective literacy practices to use in the classroom and what is actually occurring in the classrooms and what the teachers are actually teaching the students. So it's not just a problem that the teachers are not implementing these, but teachers also are not properly trained in how to use evidence-based practices. So other research suggests that teachers don't receive adequate training for how to use evidence-based practices in the classrooms, and this poses a problem in closing the achievement gap. So another challenge that we found was what is occurring in the classroom is decontextualized reading skills practice. So reviews of reading instruction delivered to individuals with intellectual disabilities reveal a constant lack of focus on reading for meaning. Instead of reading for meaning, what happens are drills, practices that focus on sight word instruction or identification of cautionary words, not real strategies for how to comprehend the text that they're interacting with. So research on this has moved towards a sociocultural approach of teaching students with learning disabilities, has proven to be more effective rather than decontextualized reading skills. And one of my partners will come and talk about reciprocal teaching and how that has proven to be effective.
Okay, so some of the strategies that can be used to kind of counter some of the difficulties faced by special needs students and try to aid them to bridge the gap or at least kind of catch up to some of their counterparts. One is universal design for learning. This is just an idea to basically make different worksheets and different assignments universal or kind of accessible to all students. The concept with this is to provide these, let's say it was a sheet or a scaffold, to provide these to all students. So not just to the special needs students, but universal because it can be helpful to all students, and in particular can also help those special needs students. Another thing is just focusing on the student. When we lesson plan, a big thing is focusing on the student in particular. This is especially important with students with special needs because, as we all know, each of our students are diverse in several ways, whether they're learning, cultural backgrounds, several ways. Same with students with disabilities. There's a very wide spectrum, and so it's important to try to think about their particular needs and try to accommodate them. Another thing, and not all our schools will have this, but if you do use of a special education teacher, there have been some kind of mixed results on the effectiveness of this, but one of the things that has been shown to be effective is this individual time. So individual time with just that one teacher, also individual time focusing on one specific subject, and we'll kind of break down and go into that a little further on the next slide. Another strategy that can be used is reciprocal teaching, as mentioned previously. Basically, the concept or idea with reciprocal teaching is to allow students to not only interact with their peers, but also with the literature or the text they're working on. So it gives them the opportunity to really break down the text rather than just looking at it, they're really analyzing. Lastly, and a really big thing that was mentioned throughout all the articles we read, teachers just need further education on this particular area. So oftentimes in the different research, it was mentioned that there's a lack of comfort with acknowledging or focusing on certain evidence-based practices for students with special needs, whether that be a notion that it's better to rely on the special needs teacher or just a lack of comfort. I'm not sure, but there is a lack of comfort there and a lack of preparation. So that's another big thing that needs to be addressed and worked on to help these students. And some examples of how these different things can be used. So for UDL, as I said, a big thing is scaffolds and templates. Something like SPOs, which kind of organize either for writing or reading, depending on what you're going to use it for. Oftentimes writing will basically provide you with that structure to break down what you're going to write in the text. And a lot of the times that's one of the biggest issues, is just metacognitive struggles where students don't have organization skills, and thus it makes it harder to comprehend and kind of build the skills that they may be lacking in. Also a big thing with these scaffolds and templates, you're likely to see improvement in not only your students with special needs, but all your students. Because with UDL, they're meant to be provided to all students. So this is something that not only supports the students with special needs, but also it integrates UDL into the classroom in a very accessible way, and in a way that students of special needs can feel comfortable and included rather than singled out, which is another thing that was mentioned in a lot of the articles. A big thing is this need and sense, or wanting for this sense of belonging, which all of our students have. Next is with special education. If you do have a special education teacher in your school, a big thing is the opportunity to focus individually on students. And I think it's a little harder in the gen ed classroom when we have so many students, but when you can, trying to focus individually on that student as well. And also on the particular subject. So one of the things that is seen to be successful is that emphasis on the particular area of struggle. And another thing as well that was mentioned is Also focusing on strengths too. So these students with special needs, although they may have some difficulties, they also have a lot of strengths. So how can we focus on incorporating these strengths, incorporating their interests to kind of pique their motivation, and then from there focus on maybe some areas of growth. And lastly, reciprocal teaching. So just providing students with meaningful opportunities to learn. So not just giving them a text that just basically has no in-depth purpose to it, but rather giving them a text they can break down, one that's pertinent to their lives, that could be helpful for transfer of knowledge, and also integrating with reciprocal teaching, integrating groups where they can work together, discuss, analyze the text. And one of the most important things about reciprocal teaching is working with a more knowledgeable other, as introduced by Vygotsky. And this more knowledgeable other, the purpose of this is allowing that student to benefit by teaching the subject, which is one of the best ways of learning, and also allowing your student with special needs to learn from their counterparts who may have some skills that they may be lacking in. So sharing that knowledge, building a knowledge base together, and kind of growing and moving forward.
And so there are some various ways that we can apply these principles into our classroom to ultimately garner a greater meaning. And so meaning is the ultimate goal that we are looking to involve in with our students. We want students to fundamentally understand the building blocks that make learning possible. Two of the ways that we can implement them is by having reflective practices such as metacognitive exercises and self-monitoring. I'll go ahead and get into the who's and what's of each and then provide some examples in the following slides. So metacognitive exercise, it is very reflective and it gets students to think about their thinking. How can this look like in our classroom? It can be provided via either verbal questioning by having the teacher engage with the students one-on-one and having them think about what they understand or don't understand about a text that they might be encountering. It also lets students know what they don't know and lets them clarify what they might be confused about so that they can further prompt their teachers and ask questions that would be pertinent to what they want to learn or need to learn. And then as well lets them know and practice for future classes or future literacy where they can also take these skills and apply them to other areas and really apply significant meaning in the context which they find themselves in. Self-monitoring allows students, as I said, to really reflect and to really think about their learning. And so by self-monitoring, we are tracking the progress by which we are acquiring the knowledge and really being able to see the growth as it goes along time. Now, self-monitoring is an evidence-based practice that has been shown to demonstrate cognitive connections between topics that we are looking to bring to students and really create those meaningful relationships in the classroom. It also helps students to just really get it and really feel included. And when they don't understand, they can stop, they can reflect, and really see what direction we need the classroom learning to go. Most importantly, we want to be able to form an individual relationship and bond with our students. And by creating that bond, we create the comfort that students require to come in and to really ask the questions that they need. And so by asking these reflective questions and by really getting students to think about the way that they are thinking, then we are having students just feel comfortable and just come in ready to learn. So we're going to go ahead and get into what some of these practices actually look like and provide some examples that you can apply in the classroom. Now, one quick preface before I even get into the examples is that there is no one singular strategy that you could implement that will address the needs for all of our students. These are just some examples of how they can look like in our classroom, but by no means are they all-encompassing or should be referred to as the only way to address special education in our classrooms. So some examples of questioning that we can have our students think about, and I'll go ahead and just read them as we go along. Does this answer make sense given the information provided? What strategy did I use to solve this problem that was helpful? What is confusing about this topic? What conclusion can I make? How does this information conflict with my prior understanding? How does this information relate to what we learned last week? And so by prompting these questions, we're getting students to, once again, as I said, reflect, reflect, reflect. And so questions can be phrased in their own way, but the ultimate goal is to get students thinking about the cognitive processes that we are looking to instill. Now, for our self-monitoring, we can also apply this within literacy and get students to really visualize themselves from the perspective of the text. So for example, the first example that is given to us is visualization. So really picturing yourself in other people's perspective, in the characters, to really understand and grasp meaning from a text. You can also ask yourself questions to really clarify text. So for example, does what I just read make sense? Are there words I don't know? What happened? So really stopping yourself along as you're engaging with the text and really checking for understanding. Drawing conclusions. Based on the details in the text, draw conclusions about what you are discussing and what the content of the text will be. And then as well, lastly, reread to just clarify. So going back into the text and rereading so that we can know what might be unclear. And so with that, these are two ways that we can implement them into our classroom. But as I said, by no means are they all-encompassing and should not be used as the end-all be-all strategy to address special education in the classroom. So in summary,
We want to go over a couple of points. We just want to remind you guys that there is no such thing as a normal classroom. When we step into the room, we walk into an area where we have diverse learners, students of different ability, and we need to be mindful of that as educators so that we can better serve them.
Additionally, we also need to remember that teachers need more preparation on how to implement evidence-based practices with their special education students. So while evidence-based practices can be provided by researchers, questions need to be asked for how do we get these teachers to actually implement these strategies? Are they accessible to the teachers? Are teachers being trained on how to properly use them?
And with that training, with more teachers being educated and more use of evidence-based practices and universal design for learning, more students can be served. So that education for teachers is extremely important. That way those evidence-based practices can be implemented, and the gap for a lot of special needs students who may be falling behind can kind of be decreased, and students can be aided in catching up with their counterparts.
So the last thing, and we'll end our video with this, we just want to thank you all for your attention during this presentation. Additionally, we would like to ask all of you to note what was interesting about this presentation and bring that with you to our discussion time. So come with any interesting points, any questions that you may have, and we will gladly answer those, and we'll have a dialogue about how we can best serve our students with special needs next year and in our careers going forward. So thank you.
Thank you.